even the guys who were most positive about Holtz had things about him and the experience that they had problems with. So he's a fireball of character, that's for sure.
Were you surprised that his reading last night described it as a Notre huge book on UNLV and it didn't receive this much negative publicity for you?
No, I mean, if you look at Notre Dame graduates are in positions of power throughout the United States. I mean, I thought it was a very fascinating opening for Koppel last night to say that they've done books that have taken on the White House, 3 different presidents, and they haven't faced the kind of pressure taking on the White House they faced taking on Notre Dame. Knows Lou Holtz, knows that he wasn't telling you the truth when he said he hasn't read the book. Lou Holtz read that book the day it got to South Bend, and if he'd have found one mistake in the book, that's what we'd be here today.
Earl, yes, we admire if you read
Oh, you're
Earl
kidding me.
Earl.
How's
No.
Earl doing?
He's doing fine.
Good. Where's he golfing these days?
Well, he's a golf coach here. And so
Is he still golf
yeah,
coaching?
He's still golf coaching. I was his secretary when you came in the office on your motorcycle helmet and your
many years
first
ago.
day of your school year.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Tell Coach I said hello.
I sure will.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Oh, man, there's something more of you guys want to film this thing.
1, 2, it's for Debbie Reed, and Debbie is D-E-B-I to Debbie.
Yeah, she a friend.
And she's an old sports reporter. She used to cover the Colts.
Oh, you're kidding me.
For the news. And then I'd like one.
Television whirlpool, and we were the wild.
Have a good day.
Well, give it my best. You get where we got a bet. I need 3. Okay. One to Lou, right? Oh, sure. Okay. Do this one to Spencer? Spencer? The game except Florida State. I live in Tallahassee. I gotta say.
You want it to be won by a field goal, don't you?
Wide something.
Well, thanks again.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
This is for my dad's
Oh,
show.
yeah, to remember the football stadium and do some football.
And your name? Is he a Notre Dame fan?
Somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
No,
Thank you. See, more media in there than
Ready to start? Good afternoon. My name is Mark Ransford. I'm the Media Relations Coordinator from Ball State University, and I'd like to welcome you to the campus this afternoon. Today our guest is Don Yaeger, a 1984 Ball State University graduate and co-author of a book that you all know, Under the Tarnished Dome, How Notre Dame Sold Its Soul for Football Glory. Don's appearance today is the first public appearance he'll make regarding the book. His visit is sponsored by the Ball State University Journalism Department through its Media Professionals and Residence program. He'll be speaking to several journalism classes today as well as you. Don's book is his third. His others were Undue Process, the NCAA's Injustice for All in 1990, and Shark Attack, Jerry Tarkanian in his battle with the NCAA and UNLV, which came out in 1992. Don would like to open with a short statement, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Actually, I don't know that I have a short statement. I do know that a couple of days ago, a reporter from USA Today was talking to me about it, and I said, given some of the phone calls that I'm getting at home anonymously left on my answering machine, I was starting to get a feeling of what it must be like to live with Salman Rushdie right now. And the reporter accurately said that I don't think Salman Rushdie would take me right now as a roommate. So I don't have anything to say other than here to talk about the book. Questions?
Don,
Mr.
before we get into the book, is this kind of the way you fantasize coming back to your alma mater after 9 years?
No, actually, it certainly wasn't. I don't think you ever think you come back with a bullseye on your chest.
Are you uncomfortable with that kind of a situation? You know, even when you were here, you seem to have a penchant for digging out the hard stuff and not backing away from things controversial. That seems to have followed you, or have you followed that kind of an idea, that approach to journalism?
Well, I've always liked those kind of stories. I think that I have been fortunate in that I've been able over a career to do those stories and do them well, and in many ways, in many ways I've been lucky to be able to do stories that other people wouldn't do, and I think that this is probably as good an example of that as you might imagine. There's probably a lot of people in this room who've known things about Notre Dame football for years, and they've not ended up in newspapers and in television, and many of them probably aren't in this book. But there are stories there to be told, and I think that that's what this book does. Yes, sir.
Why did you choose Notre Dame as a topic?
Actually, it ironically began about 2.5 years ago. My first book, Undue Process, had just come out, and in the book is a line that says somewhat, something along the lines of, "It's too bad more schools don't do it like Notre Dame football, where they can win and win honorably." And I'm sitting at home in Tallahassee, Florida on a Sunday afternoon, and a phone rings, and I answer it, and it's an anonymous caller, and we all get those. And this young man said, "I'm here to tell you, I'm reading your book, and that line is not true." And I asked why I should believe that person, and that young man proceeded to tell me that he was a Notre Dame football player at the time, and that he began telling me stories about playing for Lou Holtz, about playing at Notre Dame, about the way things had changed from the Notre Dame he thought he was being recruited to. And so I started checking those facts out. The facts all checked, and that's the way the book began. I later found out who the young man was. He is not named in the book, in large part out of respect for the fact that he had the guts to be the first one to call me. But in answer to Father Beauchamp and anyone else, he was not a disgruntled former player. He, in fact, was a current player at the time and was a starter, just a starter whose ideals had been betrayed, he felt.
Did you anticipate there would be some players either to claim they were misquoted or to attempt to recant their statements, and how do you sort of deal with that within the credibility framework?
Sure. Certainly. I mean, in any situation where you're going to take on something that's controversial, especially in a book, it's different than when you sit down and you do an interview today and a story tomorrow. People have a pretty good memory of what they said. They may still claim that they were taken out of context. They may still claim they were misquoted. But it was yesterday that they did it. Many of these interviews I did with some of these guys were a year ago. I anticipated that one of the promises I made to these guys was that I would not let any one of them hang out there to dry, that it would not be one player telling the story about playing at Notre Dame. There were 84 of them. The fact that 84 of them had the courage to talk to me at the time, I think is exceptional. The fact that 2 of them, and I think it's important that we get the number right, 2 of them have said that their quotes were taken out of context or that they were misquoted, is disappointing but not surprising. It's important to note that those 2 players, Tom Byrne and John Askin, were both on tape. Both of those interviews were provided to Ted Koppel in preparation for last night's Nightline. Koppel not only listened to the tapes, but reviewed the transcripts and other handwritten notes having to do with the interviews, and declared their claims of being misquoted laughable. So, Nightline was not going to do that story last night had there been a question about the credibility of the book. I think we've answered those questions pretty well.
Who did you write the book for?
The college football fan. I think that both the fan who doesn't like Notre Dame and has always thought badly of them, they now are probably reading this book and licking their chops. But there's also the Notre Dame fan who I think you want to read the book, you hope believed in Notre Dame for what it always has said it is, and who wants it to return to that. And if they read the book, they'll see that it wasn't, one player talking about any one of those incidences that are mentioned in the book, and they can't be pleased. Notre Dame can't be pleased. The book is not the only thing, too. I think it's important to mention that last week's Sports Illustrated had an article in which a kicker who spurned Notre Dame in favor of Florida State, Scott Bentley, was quoted as telling a story about how Holtz called him up the morning he was going to do his press conference and chewed him out and called him a loser. The next day, the New York Daily News did a story with an interview with one of Holtz's former assistant coaches, who told stories about his abuse and his abuse of people, both past and present, who are at Notre Dame. And then the book climbs in there on top of that. There is evidence here that there's something wrong at Notre Dame, and that's what I think the book is aimed at showing, and hopefully Notre Dame will want to write that. Unfortunately, Notre Dame has taken the tack of saying they don't want to address the book. They don't want to talk about the book. They'd rather talk about Doug. They'd rather talk about me. They'd rather talk about Simon and Schuster. And I think that's. I guess if I was paying the public relation groups that Notre Dame is paying to offer them advice, I would probably try the same strategy. Ultimately, I hope that as reporters sit down and read the book, see how broad the reporting is in the book, that they won't let Notre Dame escape without answering the question.
You mentioned Father Beauchamp. We got a quote from him saying that Lou Holtz has done all three things they've asked of him. He's graduated his players, he's played by the rules, and he's been a successful football coach. The players you interviewed, what does being a successful football coach at Notre Dame mean?
Win, win, win. And Lou Holtz has done that. Lou Holtz has been a very successful football coach at Notre Dame. The question of, has he done the three things Notre Dame says it wants from a coach? I think that there's ample evidence in the book that at least on two of those, he's not exactly living up to what Notre Dame says it wants. On the third one, the winning, obviously he's done that very well.
What are the first two?
Graduate his players. Yeah, on graduating his players, he's not graduating his players at the record that Notre Dame had been accustomed to in the past, at the record that Notre Dame brags about when it brings recruits in. He's still doing a tremendous job, but he is bringing in players that are a far cry from what Notre Dame has been used to in the past. On the issue of playing within the rules, I think it's very clear. Not one, not two, but 17 players in the book talk about rampant steroid use, their participation in it. Numerous players in the book talk about the ways that they were taught to get around steroid use at Notre Dame. Players in the book talk about how they found ways to get cash for helmets, cash for footballs, cash for no-show jobs, the same kind of things that go on at Oklahoma and elsewhere. So playing with in the rules, I'd probably take exception to that if you read the book and believe the people who lived that life.
For good or bad, the things that in the book might not be that unusual.
At any other program in the country, you're right.
Why was this news?
Why? I guess had
not why was it news, but why not something on someone else? Was it because he got the call solely, or if the anonymous call would have been someone from Syracuse, say?
someone at yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, you can't go back and do that. But I can tell you that if this weren't Notre Dame, y'all wouldn't probably be here today. I mean, it is and has always held itself up as something special in college athletics. It spends millions of dollars telling us how special it is. It has its own network television contract for football. As Doug Looney said last night, Notre Dame is football. You know, if it weren't for football, Notre Dame is a pretty exceptional, small Catholic university with great chemistry department and lousy weather. You know, that's what makes Notre Dame. So football is important at Notre Dame, whether they've chosen to admit it or not. What I think is what the book is about is the hypocrisy of Notre Dame not wanting to admit certain things about what it has done to remain successful in football.
Did you talk to anybody else, like, say, John Feinstein, who's written a controversial book, to get some kind of a sense of what the reaction might be?
Yeah, I ran into John at the ACC basketball tournament last year, and we talked for a little while about that. And I have to tell you,
dig its head out of the sand, so to speak, and try to address or react to the book and some of the charges made. If nothing comes of it, will this have been worth it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's, you know, it's always worth it if you can, you know, sit down and tell the story as best you see it. I'll never have any regrets about doing the book or about telling the story. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter what Father Beauchamp thinks. I don't think it's going to matter what Lou Holtz thinks. I think it's going to matter what Notre Dame fans think. And I really believe that there are enough of them out there that have wanted Notre Dame to be special, that once they get a chance to read it, they'll be the judge. Just hope a few of them are open-minded. You know, it's interesting. I thought it was very fascinating. I watched the first day reaction, the Lou Holtz, I will not read the book. I'm not going to read the book. Whatever his saying was there. If there's anyone in this room that knows Lou Holtz, they'll tell you that there's no way you can believe that. Lou Holtz has read that book. And Lou Holtz, when he read that book, was looking for a mistake. And had Lou Holtz found a mistake, that's what we'd be here talking about today. You know, it's easier to say I won't read the book when you know the stories in it are true.
So have you done any advanced preparation in case Lou Holtz or someone else within Notre Dame decides to bring a lawsuit?
Well, certainly. I mean, before Simon Schuster publishes a book like this, they have an incredible legal review process that I went through, in which every major quote in the book is challenged. I was asked to produce tapes and documents and transcripts and everything else to give Simon & Schuster, which has an unbelievable liability in something like this, the comfort level that's required. So yeah, I mean Simon & Schuster feels real good. I'll tell you that.
Do you feel? Did you have any trouble getting them to publish it?
No, absolutely not.
Through the process?
No, absolutely not. Simon & Schuster has been exceptional.
What would you like to have happen in Notre Dame now, like football program?
I think Notre Dame, hopefully they will continue to win. Hopefully they'll sit back and look and wonder whether or not they're winning the way they used to be winning. And if they decide that it's not what it used to be, hopefully they'll make some kind of effort to find those steps again.
Now, maybe you've already said it in so many words, but to take your title, can you sum up? Can you say briefly how you feel Notre Dame sold its soul to football glory? Is that something that you can encapsulate?
I can do my best, but it took me 300 pages to do it last time. So I would say that you have a football program here that very simply, it had what it wanted in a football coach in Jerry Faust. He embodied everything Notre Dame stands for, as far as decency, compassion, cared about his athletes off the field more than he did on the field. But he had one major problem, and that was that he couldn't win football games. Notre Dame decided to trade him in favor of a guy who can win football games, but who doesn't give a whit about his players off the field. He does not, in the minds, not in the minds of Don Yaeger or Doug Looney, but in the minds of the very players who played for him, Lou Holtz does not embody what Notre Dame always said it was and what they thought they were going there for. He has then recruited players who that aren't what Notre Dame was used to getting. He got Notre Dame to bend its academic standards to let him get those players in. I mean, in his very first recruiting class, he brought in Tony Rice and John Foley, two guys who couldn't score 700 on the SAT. At Notre Dame, the average student makes 1250. He put a priority on strength, letting people know that steroids were the thing that were okay if they were used. Player after player told me that. And he did not rein in the football team when it chose to do when individual players chose to do unbelievable things on and off campus. So I think the title sums it up, but it's a story about how it's lost its way. So I think that's.
Don, not only with this book, but with the previous two that deal with the NCAA and Tarkanian, is your purpose to try to improve college athletics? Is that the reason behind writing these books?
That's a tough question to answer. I mean, Sports Illustrated last year did on their college basketball edition did a thing on placing the 150 most important people in college sports on different planets based upon their role in the galaxy of college sports, and they put me out there on planet Utopia, and so I guess that some people might think that that's what I'm trying to do. I just think that I'm hoping to tell individual stories that are specific to those schools and maybe help improve the way things go at those schools.
What's your thought process by deciding which schools that you want to write about or who you want to talk about? Is there any, do you just go to investigate any school, or is there certain ones that you feel or know anything about?
Well, I mean, there are lots that I feel and know a lot about now. I mean, I get a lot of phone calls, as you can imagine. But, you have to sit back and try to figure out which ones are doable, which ones, when you write books, and that's what I'm doing for a living now, and that's it. The publishers need to know that there's a market out there for those books. Obviously, there's a market for a Notre Dame book. They had the largest publishing of any sports book Simon & Schuster's ever done in the first printing, and they've already announced a third printing and the book's not even on the shelf in most places in the country right now. So. There are a lot of factors that go into deciding who you write about. Doug had a pretty funny idea, actually, though, the other day, because we've gotten phone calls from people saying, gosh, I hope you never choose to look at our athletic program. Heck, somebody from Ball State said that to me today. And we thought it might be kind of interesting. You got farmers who are being paid not to grow certain crops. Maybe we could go into certain cities and wait there till they pay us not to write a book about them, and it could become real interesting. But no, that's obviously not going to happen.
Do you think it's possible, having seen what you've seen and your knowledge of what goes on in college athletics, is it possible for Notre Dame to win without going along with the current?
Absolutely. I believe it is. I believe it is more possible at Notre Dame than any school in America. I mean, name me a kid that grows up wanting to play football that wouldn't put Notre Dame in the top 5 schools they want to play for. Name me a smart kid who grows up wanting to play football who wouldn't put Notre Dame in the top 3 schools he wants to play for. I mean, if you're going to tell me, and this is a great argument, several players made this argument, if you're going to tell me that there are 912,000 kids out there playing high school football right now, if you're going to tell me that among those there are not 22 of them who are both exceptional students and unbelievable athletes who want to play for the best and most famous football playing school in America every year, and they want to do it honestly, I won't believe. I mean, I just can't believe that that's not true. That there are not that group of people out there. So, do I think they can do it with that? Yeah, absolutely. Probably Notre Dame more than any other school in the country. They don't have to break. They don't have to bend the rules.
Don, as you mentioned earlier, Notre Dame is one of those schools you either love or you love to hate. What's your feeling about Notre Dame? Did you grow up liking or hating Notre Dame?
I've told everyone this. I mean, I grew up Notre Dame. I grew up as a Notre Dame fan. Remain so today. And so but what disappoints me is that as I've done the book, as I've interviewed the players, and again, you know, better than any of the rest of us in this room, these guys know what's going on in that program. A lot of people may have opinions. These guys know. I figured it out real quick that this is not the Notre Dame I grew up rooting for.
You're not Catholic by chance, are you?
No, thank you.
Any reaction from Catholics who are not affiliated with Notre Dame?
No.
Death threats?
Interesting phone calls, not death threats.
I know this may be jumping the gun a little bit, but if you look ahead to any other folks now, have you got any ideas what you want to do next?
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. One in particular that I've already decided to do. It's a real quick project. I'm going to do a book with the basketball coach at Louisiana State, Dale Brown. Just a quick biography that we'll have done by March of next year. So it's not going to take a lot of time, but it'll be. He's one of the last great characters in college sports, so I think he'll be interesting.
Just to get back to the steroid question again, some of the Notre Dame officials, it sounds like they've admitted the fact Notre Dame, some players have used steroids there. They say the book has characterized it as much more widespread than it really is. I'd just like to get your reaction.
Again, you know, in the book, 17 players are quoted as saying they either did steroids, they sold steroids, or they were in the presence of other people doing steroids. Other players are quoted in the book telling how they were asked to cheat on steroid tests for players who were doing steroids. You know, Nightline last night I think summed it up very well. A kid by the name of Jeff Pearson talks about doing steroids in the book. Talks about Holtz walking up and tapping him on the wrist and say, you know, Jeff, we just don't do that here at Notre Dame. We're not like Michigan. Jeff Pearson, you know, said, hey, I was right in the very middle of it. I'll tell you, if Notre Dame says, as they have said in a written letter to Simon & Schuster, that only 5 players have ever tested positive for steroids at Notre Dame, then either their testing program was lousy or everybody was cheating, because Jeff Pearson himself knows who was doing steroids, and he'll tell you that more than 5 did it, more than 5 tested. In fact, I think it's interesting, Notre Dame says that 5 players tested positive at Notre Dame. In the book, we quote 8 players who were doing steroids at Notre Dame, while at Notre Dame. So, and again, that's 8 of 84, and of the other players who didn't admit to doing steroids, there were several who admitted doing so off the record, who wouldn't put their name to it. So I can tell you that the number's higher than 8. You know, that it is very clearly, if Notre Dame really has only had 5 players test positive, then they need to find a new testing program, no matter how much they want to brag about it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good job. None of the kids threw me. No, I was expecting. Tallahassee. Well, that's not where I'm from. I mean, I went to high school.
Came to Ball State.